Hey everybody, this is Kyla here from Waveflow, the mindfulness practice that creates ripples of acceptance, meaning, and appreciation. This month I'm hosting a 10 days of gratitude program in celebration of my new to the market gratitude journaling workbook, Ripple. This morning I caught up with Kathryn Flaschner, one of those friends who I just feel so proud of. We met a few years ago, back when Kathryn was a teacher where I was practicing yoga at Baptiste Power Yoga in San Francisco. And since then, she's made a major career up level. She moved to LA and is currently a brand strategist at the media powerhouse, Hello Sunshine, pursuing her passion of acting on the side and also sharing deeply honest stories through her podcast, The Truth Is, which is linked below in the show notes. Kathryn and I reflected together on communities that feel like home, people who we've leaned on during transitional phases of our lives where we craved support, connection, and guidance, creating balance, and spaces we hope to each return to older and wiser. Enjoy our catch-up, and don't forget to try the Waveflow practice for yourself. I'll drop all of the prompts in the show notes, and I invite you to try out Waveflow's free mobile app or grab a copy of my workbook, Ripple, to discover the layers of possibility and meaning-making through a month-long commitment to the Waveflow practice. It's available on Amazon or through our site at waveflowapp.com. Okay, here is my conversation with Kathryn. Hi, everybody. I'm here with one of my friends and people who I deeply admire. I met Kathryn back when she lived in San Francisco through a yoga community that we're part of together. And now she's off to big girl job down in LA, and I miss her deeply. And so I'm so excited she's here to practice Waveflow with me today. Welcome, Kathryn.
Thank you. I need it, and it's so good to see you. And I'm so grateful to have had this invitation.
Okay, Kathryn, this is fun for me to just catch up because I want to hear about it genuinely. So could you share with us about a group or a community, whatever it is, somewhere that right now feels like home to you?
Mm. Yeah, the first thing that came to mind, I've been in LA for 2 years, which is crazy to think. And it was a real starting over in terms of coming here and not knowing anybody. And and I came down here with aspirations of outside of the professional opportunity I had, really to pursue and explore my passion for acting and writing and theater. And so the community and group specifically that I'm super grateful for is the acting studio that I found in LA. It's run by a man named John Markland. It's called the Markland Studio. And I remember it's a longer story, but I can remember walking into the first class being so intimidated and being like, oh great, these are LA actors. And it was just I totally was psyching myself out, and to think that from that first moment to a year and a half later, it's become the people where I'm like, oh, these are the people I'm supposed to meet in this chapter. And it took me allowing them to become real friends versus me being intimidated by them. And so it's just that specifically, and to go do that every Monday night drops me back into just connecting with people and being myself. And he asked last week or why do you do this work? And for me, it was, I said, I act and I come to this because it makes me feel the most alive. And so that's the group that I feel really grateful for.
Oh, that sounds so cool. I bet it's and I bet just being in kind of the epicenter of that space kind of amplifies it. That's awesome. Um,
Yeah. I mean, you meet people that, you know, come from all over and are like, I came to LA to do this. And it's just, you gain an appreciation for people that are just trying something and pursuing something. So it's great.
Okay, so for me, the commute, and this is kind of like an unintended or like an unexpected consequence of having the kids. I feel like I've derived so much community through the families that go to my son's preschool. And
Hmm.
I never like anticipated this, I would say. Like it's almost like I think when I thought about having kids, I thought about it more in the context of like my own family and like wanting the like I don't know, like the like people to have dinner with who like are like I don't know, who you just have that like deep connection with. And then what's been really fun is since so our family moved out to like a suburb of San Francisco a couple years ago, and specifically the director of Graham's preschool, whose name is Siobhan, in addition to some of the really the moms who volunteer for the preschool, like Lane, Natalie, Crystal, there's a whole bunch of them. They've I've felt so embraced through this community, and like it's really through people like volunteering, like saying like, "Hey, we're all gonna like do these things together on the weekends or after school." And in a lot of ways, like parenting a toddler for people who don't have kids, like it's challenging. Like it's not easy peasy. So it's like really important, I think, to have these like connections with other parents who either have older kids or like who have navigated what you're navigating before, just because like just like the things like with the sleep and like the eating and like the basic things like just require so much like honestly coaching and like learning what's worked for other people. Yeah, and so like the feeling I get from that group is just like deeply embraced. It's like the big sisters I don't have basically because I feel like I can text, we have like a group, I can like text them and ask questions and yeah. Yeah, it's really cool.
I love that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll move on to our next prompt.
Okay.
Tell us about somebody who supported you during a transitional phase of your life recently.
Oh, yeah, it makes me emotional. Um, it's many people, and she was representative of our community. And I'm thinking of my dear friend and our friend Blair. And my friendship with Blair, we were reflecting on it this week, also a Baptiste yoga teacher, where we got close in San Francisco, and then me moving here, it was like, we're just like starting to build this like close friendship. And I was like, it's not going to change. And when I was moving, she was like, no, it's going to change. Like, of course it's going to change. And she was a person that consistently, when I moved here, was like, it was so uncomfortable. And I saw you in the first year, and I was just like, like, what am I doing here? She was a remind. She would be like, you're supposed to be here. I would say, and then in that reflection, I wanted to say, we were reflecting last night, our relationship has gotten stronger in the geographic distance, which is really interesting. The specific transition, I went through a pretty tumultuous breakup earlier this year, with a partner that had moved down here, and I don't need to get into details there, but it was pretty destabilizing when it ended. And there was a process of deciding he was leaving, and we were moving into a place together as it was ending. Like, it was a lot to process, and I wasn't even ready to talk to anyone about it. In like the week or two after as it was happening, she was one of the first people that I told on the phone. And I remember it, like her being like, yes, the foundation between you and him has shattered, and what you thought you had between you has shattered, but what you're going to find is that you have your own foundation underneath that. And it was so true. And she's just been so solid for me in that moment. And so really grateful for that friendship this year.
Oh, kudos to like powerful female friendships. Um, okay. So this is like kind of a funny, this is what came to mind. So,
I
so
love it.
how we do this here is like it's what comes up. Like you don't have to like question if it's right or wrong. So there is a person who our family's gotten super close with. Her name is Keelan, and she was actually like our first nanny when I went back to work when my older son was like a newborn baby. I went back to work at like 13 weeks. And so she, like any new mom going back to work, like trusting the nanny is like a thing, right? Because it's like your precious newborn baby who
Yeah.
like feels so fragile and like the whole thing is so new and like destabilizing. And so she, for whatever reason, like I just felt completely, and Andrew and I share this sentiment because we've like talked about it. Like we just completely trusted her. Like there was never a thought of like she wouldn't tell us if something happened. Like because I feel like that's kind of what you want most as a parent is just like if yeah, things will happen, but like as long as like you can feel trusted to talk about it or whatever. So she I remember like so it was a few months later now and we knew like she was transitioning to going to nursing school. So we knew that like her time as our nanny was limited up until she was leaving for school. And in it was like coming down to like she was like leaving in 3 weeks and I was talking to her because she had nannied through college, so she had like done this as her job for a few years. And so I was like, Keelan, like I felt so conflicted at that time because I really wanted to spend more time with my son. I was like traveling a bunch for work. I just didn't feel like I was like, this is like no way to live. Like I was just like, this is not working. And I like just genuinely asked her, I'm like, what would like how would you do it if you were a new mom? Like given that you've seen all these like kids through their young life, like what do
Mm.
you think the mix is? Because I was like, I'm not whatever I'm doing, like it's not working. And so she said like Kai, like I would have a job where like I could go part-time when my kids were young and then like resume it when they were older or like, when it's no longer cool to like hang out with your parents, then you would be much happier like getting back into the job. And so, and I really like got that. And I was like, I think you're right. I was like, and I literally then like the next week like told my boss I was leaving and it's like kind of weird because like you don't necessarily like think about like a younger like this was our like 23-year-old nanny. Like it wasn't like
Yeah.
older mom or something. And I was just like, yeah, like I think that makes a lot of sense. I
Yeah.
yeah, and I just like I kind of like took her advice and just did it. And so it was scary for me to do that because I had like had these like big corporate jobs for my whole career and
Yeah.
um I guess like to be determined how that goes. But for right now, like it's given
Yeah.
me a lot of like flexibility and ease to like prioritize my kids, which I didn't, which you don't have when you're like competing with the full-time job. Um
Mm. And if can I respond with two quick things because I
yeah,
love that.
yeah,
One, it sounds like to me like she almost reflected back like an answer that you had inside of you, like
yeah,
and she but the other thing that's broader that I think is so meaningful, I think it's cool that a younger woman that doesn't have kids, right? Like
yeah,
suggested that. Like I find that sometimes some of the younger women that I work with, they like they're not like tainted by experience and like
yeah,
expectations. And so they're like this one girl I love, she's like, yeah, this is just a simulation. Like meaning she brings like a levity to it. And
yeah,
sometimes I find like I'm in the millennial that like overthinks everything and
yeah.
analysis paralysis. I also think in the context of like I work with a lot of high-powered women with demanding careers and I feel the change of like the era of like have it all, do all the things, do the big like and I think there's a movement to like inviting ease and rethinking the model
Yeah.
that works and it's going to be
Yeah.
different for everyone. And so I think it's interesting that a younger woman reflected that to you and like gave you permission. And I think like that intergenerational reflection is so meaningful and
Totally.
you've tried it on and it's working for you, which I think is really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. Well, working, I mean, it's like every day is a roller coaster
Yeah.
ride, but like it's certainly working better. Shout out to our Gen Z gals existing in the context. Okay.
Yeah, they keep us at ease, I would say, something like
Yeah.
that.
We all need a little Gen Z energy in our lives.
Yeah.
Okay. Leading us right into our next prompt. Interesting. In what ways are you pursuing balance in your
Mm.
life at the moment?
This is like a micro one, and I'm laughing all week because it's like I listened to one podcast and now I bring it up in every conversation. Is if I like just went to a Tony Robbins conference. It's not about Tony Robbins, but I listened to a interview with the researcher and author Joe Dispenza. Are you familiar with him? If you aren't, he's popping up for me now, and I think he's having a moment. And he's written some great books that I haven't read yet. He talks about how hard it is to change, and I want to say it correctly. The idea that it gave me this week that I'm very aware of is that my tendency to like white knuckle through things and like repeat the same patterns of like complaining about work and wanting things to change and they're not changing, and in our language in Baptiste, like feeling stuck and not removing the rocks and all the things. The thing that listening to him taught, like, helped crystallize for me was like, if you're going to go about life differently, and now I'm realizing how similar it is to our yoga practice, you have to like take the pause to regulate your nervous system and shift your perspective on like what's in front of you. And so that's a bit conceptual, but what I would say about it, and I'll use a specific, I had a meeting this morning with someone that I've worked with for like 7 years, that it can be challenging at times. And I had to wake up and be like, how do I want this to feel? I want to not feel like a victim. I want to feel clear and in control and collaborative, and like actually getting in my body and breathing and like making sure the like well-intended intention is also felt. Like his whole thing, similar to our yoga, was like Joe Dispenza's, is like your mind and body have to be regulated and connected. And so, long way to answer your question with a theory I've been sitting with, but making sure that I'm like in my body throughout the busy day, because a lot of my first year in LA was me just like going through the motions and being in my head and not like being present to my experience. And so I honestly think recently I've just been like, how do I slow down slightly so that I'm actually present with everything I'm doing and not getting lost in the busyness. And so the balance, I think, is coming from allowing myself to just move through the world with more ease, regardless of like the triggers that are going to pop up in the spaces that I occupy. Namely, like, I think the corporate America space is the one that can bring up a lot of triggers. And so what does it look like to just like allow it to all happen and breathe through it? So long answer, but trying to have more ease versus thinking that it all has to change and then I'll get to relax. Like, what if I just relaxed with all of it?
Just curious because I feel like even in me, I can think about like people who like I'm like riled up just like thinking
Yeah.
about having a confrontational
There's
conversation.
so much history like
Yeah,
in your body. Yeah.
yeah. So how do you have actually like a tactical breathing practice you're doing, or is it just like reminding yourself that there's an intention? Or like what is that?
I've tried a bunch of things. Like, I'm going to ride my Peloton before this meeting. I need to like get some, but I think that the big lesson for me is that it's in my body, and it's like, how do I move? Maybe it is sitting and breathing. For me, it's more of like, I know when the thing that isn't helpful if it's like I keep doing emails or I get on my phone and I'm avoiding the anxious feeling of meeting with whoever it is. And so it's something for me, the like the tactical is like to get away from screens for a moment. Maybe it's moving my body, maybe it's going outside, maybe it's taking breaths. The other thing I've learned from acting is to like name the feeling aloud. I feel really anxious. Okay, that's there, and then that allows it to move a little bit. So sometimes for me, the like sitting and trying to breathe isn't enough, and I need to like have a conversation with myself. But what doesn't work is like avoiding the feeling and pushing it down. And the last thing I would say on it is, and you can edit this if I'm being long-winded, but the like, I'm I it shouldn't feel tense in the body. And I've had Zoom meetings where I'm shaking because there's so much history, which is crazy. And I know that other person isn't feeling this way. It's me. So, how do I like invite relaxation? And the Joe Dispenza thing, and then I'll stop talking. Your body's in survival, like it's in fight or flight, and we can't live that way. It's not a T-Rex chasing us. Like we're gonna be okay. So that self conversation, I would say, is the thing that really helps me. And sometimes it's talking aloud to myself or my dog.
Girl, that is a practice. Woo. Um, okay, I have to look at Joe's stuff. I
I'll
think
send it to
I've
you.
heard of it, but I haven't gone deep. I like now that you're saying it, I'm like, I feel
I
like
think I think he's having a moment and it kept popping up, but I'll send it to you.
okay. In what ways am I pursuing balance in your life at the moment? I've I felt like I was getting into a place where I I think in being a parent, there's a lot of like monotony in some ways in the routine because it's like, okay, you're like getting the food ready, then you're like feeding that, you're giving them the food, then you're cleaning up the food, then you're putting on the clothes, and like that's not, so it's a lot of like repetition of the same consistent actions. And I felt like what was missing was like I missed learning, like I missed self-development, and I feel like I was always a good student growing up, and I like derived a lot of joy out of learning at school. And I wasn't even like the smartest kid, but I could like work hard at like remembering or like grasping a concept if it was like a math or science thing, like if I really focused. So I think I've been kind of rediscovering that love for learning through I'm taking online classes to learn to code. I think it will give me like more solid feet to stand on with Waveflow, and also just like the sheer like enjoyment of learning
Mm.
has really like lit me up a little bit. And it's something where like I have a goal of like at least like 3 or 4 hours a week that I'm doing this. It doesn't always happen because like stuff comes up with the kids, but in an ideal state, that's what I would be doing. And I do feel like in some ways learning it is helping me recognize patterns, just because it's almost like you're learning a language in the way that you're like learning different functions and then you're like repeating them, etc. So yeah, for me, like seeking out balance has come through growth, and like firing up different parts of my brain has felt really healthy. It's hard
Mm.
though it's hard to create space for that, because it's like, okay, I could be like working, or I could be doing these other things, like we're spending so much money on childcare, like there's all those thoughts like bubbling in the background, so I really have to like pacify that and be like, okay, like I could spend my whole life worrying about that, or like prioritize my own growth for a little, at least a few hours a week. Um,
And it sounds like it's like a reground when those like doubts come up, or if you would even call them that. It's like, why am I doing it? Like you remind yourself, you know why you're doing it. And
mhm.
yeah, coding's impressive. That's an impressive choice.
Well, yeah, I mean, we'll see if I can like follow through with this commitment, but
Yeah.
I think like it's just being in the process of learning has felt energizing. Like
Yeah.
when I finish my like hour that day, I'm like, oh, cool. Like the feeling is really positive. So
Yeah.
at least
And
that's
I also love it because, I'm sure you reflect on this, taking a pause from the big corporate job and having your life look differently. And it's
Mhm.
obviously an acknowledgement to like mothers and domestic workers everywhere, that like
Mhm.
productivity for, for for whose standards and whose output, like working in an organization that's like capitalist and driven is one thing, but now like you're looking at your whole life and your family and your own growth that isn't like within that structure or dictated by a hierarchy at a company. Like I think that's a really cool autonomy to take on.
Yeah, and it's definitely a shift, because I went for so many years from like let's focus on like growing a business, let's grow
Yeah.
my career, like let's maximize it. And now it's the shift is like, okay, I might not like, I'm certainly spending a lot of energy on my kids. I don't get paid to like take care of them, but I think like
Yeah.
even like internally, it's like it's like a hurdle I have to overcome internally because it's like now people are choosing to have kids later and later. So they've had these big careers before they have kids, and it's a major shift for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, we will move on to our final prompt. What is a place you hope to return to older and wiser?
Do you have one? Do you want to go first?
Yeah, and this just like popped up for me. This is so random. In in college I took an there's this famous class at Brown that's called Engine 9, and the professor who I can't remember if he's still teaching it or if he's like retired at this point because he had to be like pushing 90 when I took the class. So I don't know what's happened, but his
Yeah.
name was Barrett Hazeltine, and he taught this class where he invited in people in his network and like alums who had started companies, and then it was sort of like a Harvard Business School situation. Like you'd get the case, your group would reflect on the case, and then you would advise the company on like what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I loved this class. Like I remember I'm trying to think of like the Vineyard Vines, one of the Vineyard Vines guys came. Like it was just cool companies that where you were inspired by like learning why they started it and then like what hurdles they were facing and what direction they took. And I would love to like go back, I think, into a space like that, having experience, like having worked at companies that actually faced hurdles like that. Like,
Yeah.
like just thinking, like, even like when I was working at Soul Cycle and the pandemic hit, like, holy shit, like that was crazy. And I wasn't on the leadership team, so it wasn't like I was like the CEO or something, because I like thank God, because that was so stressful. But I
Yeah.
like there were like decisions that I had at least like influence in like being part of the brainstorm group, and like it is it's intense. Like I don't even know how else to say it. It's like we like a lot of the people who I worked with like took really seriously the like fact that like we're employing a lot of people, and like a lot of those people's lives are like connect closely tied to what this company is or like what they do in their job, etc. And so just like yeah, like it's one thing to like read about it in a case and another thing to like hear about it from someone who's like been in the middle of those like very stressful situations. And
Yeah.
so that yeah, maybe like a boomerang back into that space eventually, but it yeah, like I remember at the time being so like my attention was so wrapped at what these stories these, you know, former entrepreneurs were telling or current entrepreneurs depending on who it was, and like it I'm really appreciative to have, you know, through whatever luck and, you know, hard work have been able to be in situations where I got to like be at the table in some of those situations, and it
Mhm.
while it is really intense, it's also thrilling. So yeah, that's what came up.
It, no, that you just storytelling there took me right back to being in business school. And I got my MBA in Rochester, New York at the Simon Business School. And there's one answer that is, and I'm super grateful I get to do it usually annually to go back to that space. And it's so interesting going back to like the me that was 23 in an MBA program and like I'm a woman in business now, and this is what this looks like. And I have to get a skirt suit, and and I have to like craft my personal pitch. And like, I learned that in the 2 years, and now for the over a decade since then, that's like, you have to like be fully you. And the MBA is a tool to go out into the world and into organizations. But the more you bring yourself to it and don't hide that, the more impact and the more fun you're going to have. So, like, that that's one answer 100%. And I love what you just said. The thing that like selfishly I want to come back to older and wiser is like living in LA right now. And like I'm like, I need to talk to like me 5 years older about how to navigate this. And I think and I had this experience in the San Francisco chapter for the first couple years. It's like, okay, now I kind of have a sense of this place and it still is super daunting. And, I was talking to someone last night about like, it's really easy to isolate yourself here because it's so big and I commute for an hour and I find here versus like a New York, at least my experience in New York is you kind of have to put yourself out there and try things. And even it's just the flow of the city, like having to like drive to them and try it's harder to meet people and find community in that way. But I'm trying to get over the like hiding from that and to just like throw myself in. And so I anticipate the me that's older and wiser would be like, what are you waiting for, girl? Like, get out there and make the most of it. Like, you're paying to live in LA and it's not cheap. And let's like show up and shine a little bit. So selfishly, I want that. And of hopefully eventually I get it.
Okay, Kathryn, where can people find you? Like which dog parks in LA? Like where are
Oh
you
yeah, yeah. Can you
hanging out?
promote me making friends? I moved over to like I'm like not far from Pasadena now. I'm in Highland Park. It's like east of downtown. And I love it over here. So that's where I am. Digitally, I have an Instagram and a podcast that I'm not active on, but this is motivating me to come back to them. Um, I'll claim it now. I'm working up it's not courage, it's prioritization at this point to audition to teach yoga again. So there are things on the list that you're bubbling up in me that I need to come back to.
All right, if you know what the words journey into power mean,
Yeah, I
contact
do. I
Kathryn
have the
in the
book. I was
area.
looking at the 40 days book because I know Wiley and Annie are leading it. And I was like, let me half participate from afar.
Oh, they're doing such a great job. It's been so fun, intense and fun.
It's good.
Um, Flash, it was so good to see you. I love you so much.
I
Thank you
love you
for
too.
sharing.
This was such a treat. Enjoy your